Welcome to the show. It's good to have you with me here another week. April's been a little bit of a strange month. Had a couple of reruns here, which is unusual on this show, but good to be back with you. And one of my favorite things about the springtime and summertime living here in the Ohio Valley is the good zoo up at Oglebay. And with me later on in today's show is going to be Joe Greathouse, the director of the zoo at Oglebay and also assistant professor of biology at West Liberty University. He's going to have with him a couple of his animal friends from the zoo. So this is going to be a little bit different for us, and I'm looking forward to it. Don't want to kind of tip off, what type of animals we'll have, so you got to keep watching to see what we're going to have with us here today. But first I want to talk about some things that have been happening here in the local area. The first is Wheeling Island Stadium in the news this week because parts of the stadium are falling down. I noticed that there was a concrete slab that had dipped, was the first sign of something going wrong, and they tried to remove that piece of concrete with a crane, and next thing you know, another piece comes down when they're doing that, and obviously some structural problems going on there at Wheeling Island Stadium. It was rebuilt in 1987 in its current state. I can actually remember that. Previously the stadium is set down much lower to the field, of course raised up 10 feet or so off the ground now, but one of the finest stadiums in the state of West Virginia. And now a lot of question marks out there as to whether or not the stadium will be ready for the OVAC All-Star game in July, whether it'll be ready for the start of regular season play in the fall, and of course whether it'll even be ready for the Super Six in December. My guess is that it will be ready for just about all those things, except perhaps we'll have to see about the OVAC All-Star game. The Wheeling Park regular season games can probably utilize one side of the stadium or the other if there's not too much interference with the traffic flow, with the construction, etc. But they are in the early stages of trying to determine what exactly is wrong, and of course they want to have to do a good thorough inspection to make sure that other parts of the stadium are not failing as well, because you don't want to have any safety hazards out there or issues when there are people there. So right now it's no one's allowed there. Streets closed off. There's been rerouting of traffic patterns on Wheeling Island as a result of this, but it seems like the county officials have gotten out there right away. We've got professionals out there in terms of engineers and others, and of course Kim Miller, the superintendent of schools for Ohio County Schools, is always right on top of things, seems to do a great job and keeps the public well informed as to what's going on. So we'll keep an eye on that and see how long the stadium may be out of use, but hopefully they can get it back ready for the OVAC All-Star game in July. If not, there are some options out there. The game has previously been played in Martins Ferry, in Steubenville, so there are other venues out there that can hold the type of crowd that usually comes for the OVAC All-Star game. And sometimes even a little change of pace is something different for people, but it's a great venue for games, so hopefully it'll be back in action. Speaking of Wheeling Island Casino, big news with greyhound racing. Governor Jim Justice of West Virginia has vetoed the legislation that would have eliminated greyhound racing basically in the state of West Virginia. The way it basically works is that money is taken from the casinos, given to the state, and then some of that money is used to fund the greyhound racing. So there was legislation proposed and passed that would have defunded basically the greyhound racing industry, instead used those funds that come from the casinos for other purposes. Well, the governor vetoed that legislation, saying that it would have too much of a significant impact on jobs, including and especially maybe here in the northern panhandle with the greyhound racing that goes on at Wheeling Island Casino. So the governor has vetoed that legislation. Also, of course, the governor is vetoing other legislation, such as the budget that had been passed by the West Virginia legislature. And one of the things I think we need to talk about is the veto power of the governor in West Virginia. It is not like the veto power of the President of the United States in a very important way. The President of the United States can veto legislation, and then it has to be overridden by a supermajority, two-thirds majority, in order to override the president's veto. Not true here in West Virginia. The governor's veto can be overridden by a simple majority vote by the West Virginia legislature. So in other words, the same vote that was necessary to pass the legislation in the first place can also be the vote that overrides the governor's veto. So does the governor's veto really mean anything if the legislature can just go back and take the same vote? Well, maybe, because the legislature's out of session. They may not want to go back into session, or may not be called back into session just to pass something again. It may not be that important to them, or they may change their mind, I guess. With respect to the budget, of course, they're going to have to pass a budget, so that's something they kind of have to go back into session to do. But things like the greyhound racing legislation, that can simply just die on the vine and not be overridden. But I'd really like to see thought out there about a constitutional amendment in West Virginia to change this veto process. I think it should be more akin to the federal system, where it takes a greater majority in order to override a veto. Part of our system of government is having checks and balances. those checks and balances are somewhat taken away when the governor's veto is somewhat meaningless, or a lot less meaningful at least, because it can be overridden by the same majority of legislators that passed law in the first place. So I would like to see that amended in order to make it where a supermajority does have to be required in order to override a governor's veto. So I'm going to kind of continue talking about that a little bit in the days, months, and maybe even years to come until maybe that happens, because I think it's something that's necessary for good government. You know, speaking of, the economy and things going on in jobs, take a look around downtown Wheeling, and you see the Bory lofts are almost completed, and hopefully that'll bring more people living in downtown Wheeling, but also look in the health plan's new building going up and kind of changing the entire look and feel of downtown Wheeling in some ways. I mean, some buildings have been cleared. Now there's some, just parking lots or vacant land there, but that allows for development, because instead of seeing an old rundown building, now potential developers see space, and they don't have to get rid of a building, or they don't have to worry about getting this old building torn down. They just say, I can put something here, I can build something here. So I think there's some good things happening. I think even some of the changes with the traffic patterns, where streets are now 2 ways instead of 1 way, really help things like that. So good things are happening here in the city of Wheeling, and I think that's part of what the governor has recognized, is that we need the Northern Panhandle in West Virginia to thrive in order for West Virginia to do well. And I think that he recognizes that jobs here in the Northern Panhandle are important to the state as a whole, and maybe that's why he's taken some of the action he's taken. We need to take a break. When I come back, I will have with me Joe Greathouse, the director of the Oglebay Good Zoo, along with some of his friends. Stay with me here on the Jamie Bordas Show.
Don't forget to do your homework.
All right, Mom. Trick or treat.
Here you go. Happy Halloween.
For your home, for your life, for more than 50 years. DeNoon Lumber.
Disasters happen. We take care of them all, from cleanup to reconstruction. Tell your insurance provider you prefer Panhandle Cleaning and Restoration, the official restoration company of the Mountaineers.
Welcome back to the show. This is my favorite time each week when I have a guest with me, and this week I have with me the director of the zoo at Oglebay, Joe Greathouse, but also, a first on this show, I have a special friend with me, and that is Stevie the alligator. Joe, thanks for being here with Stevie.
Sure, thank you for having me.
You know, alligators are going to be a big thing at the zoo this spring and summer at Oglebay. Not just this little guy here, Stevie, who's, what, about 2 years old now?
Yes, Stevie's right around 2.
And he's an American alligator?
He is. We have 2 types of alligators on the planet, American alligators and Chinese alligators. And so Stevie's from the southeastern United States.
You know, I never knew they were so small. I mean, you envision that by 2, I always thought they'd be closer to full grown at 2, but obviously not.
Yeah, typically they'll grow about a foot per year, up to 15 feet long. In extreme cases, 19.5 feet long.
And so one of the big things going on at the zoo this year, this spring, summer, is the arrival of an albino alligator.
Yes, we have the ghost of the bayou at the zoo. So she's an albino alligator that's 7 foot long, and albino alligators are incredibly rare. There have only ever been 2 clutches of eggs found in the wild, and the reason why they're so rare is typically a predator is going to be able to eat an albino alligator really quickly when it's young. So we have the ghost of the bayou at the zoo. She has no pigment in her eyes. They're bright pink. And Cajun legend says that if you stare at the eyes, you'll get a year of good luck.
Is that right?
Really?
I'm going to stare at them. I'm going to give it a shot. So the albino is at the zoo now?
She is. She arrived last night on a flight from Tulsa Zoo. We unloaded her and took her into the exhibit. Guests can see her every day from 11 o'clock to 4 o'clock.
So, all right, with an albino, I guess there's got to be some type of special things that are done because of this, the lack of pigment, things of that nature?
There are. We have to be incredibly careful to protect her skin because she has no melanin or pigment in her skin. So we can't keep her outside. We can't keep her anywhere where she would have a basking bulb that has UV light in it, or she'll get sunburned. So we have to make sure any heat that we provide to her comes through her water heat.
Interesting. So, obviously you're very knowledgeable with respect to these animals, and in addition to being the director of the zoo at Oglebay, you're also an assistant professor of biology at West Liberty University, where this zoo program, this kind of joint partnership between the Oglebay Zoo and West Liberty is really kind of taken off here.
It is. It's one of 4 programs in the United States where a student can go to school and get an undergraduate degree to learn to work in a zoo. And our program's really special. It's the only program in the United States where we have a partnership between an association of zoos and aquariums accredited zoo and a university. So for the first year, we've had 20 students enrolled in the program, and they get to come to the zoo and learn about how to take care of the animals at the zoo. They'll take different lab classes and different lecture classes at the zoo and really volunteer and gain a year's worth of experience, essentially working full time before they graduate, so they're ready to get out into the workforce and become future professionals in our profession.
You're from the Valley originally and have a long tenure experience with the Oglebay Zoo, and then left for a time being and went out to the Columbus area, and now you're back. But you spent some time with the Columbus Zoo, the wilds that maybe a lot of people from this area have visited before.
Yeah, I've been at the Good Zoo since 1999. I started out as an intern, and then I was an animal keeper there. Went on to become the general curator, stayed at the zoo till 2012. Then went out to the wilds, Columbus Zoo, as the director of wildlife. So I did a lot of essentially research out there with animals like bobcats, hellbender salamanders, some of the wild salamanders and snakes in that area. And then came back home to teach at West Liberty, and came back home to the zoo to be part of Oglebay again.
What are some of the things that you learned out there working in Columbus and at the wilds that you're able to bring back here that's maybe allowed you to do this job even better?
I think my experience at Columbus in the wilds, where previously I worked at a small zoo, so I got to see how a big zoo does things, especially from the guest services standpoint, but also from some of the different exhibitory aspects, where try to involve a little bit more interaction with our exhibits, and that's the way we're going to try to go in the future, is to have more interactive and up-close experiences with the animals at the zoo. Especially since we have such a nice, small, personalized facility at Oglebay. Of all the accredited zoos in the country, we're the 4th smallest community in the United States that has an accredited zoo. So that's something we should be really proud of.
So when you say interactive, I mean, it's allowing people to interact with things like this alligator here even? Or?
Absolutely. So most guests that have been there for the past 40 years, everybody knows you can go in and pet the goats and feed the goats, and recently we've been able to do the lorikeet exhibit. But we also have small animal areas where guests can feed or pet, go up to meet the guinea pigs, chinchillas, rabbits at the children's zoo. But this year we opened a new exhibit for our ring-tailed lemurs, and we've incorporated a feeding and training door in that. So every day at 2 p.m., the keeper will give a talk about the ring-tailed lemurs. She can open up the door and show kids how she trains, and the kids are going to be able to help feed the lemurs while she's doing the training. It's those types of one-on-one experiences that really help our kids connect with wildlife. And that's just kind of an introductory, personalized experience to some of our animal encounters that we also will offer.
Can I pet Stevie here?
Absolutely.
Let's see what Stevie's like here. Pretty rough on this side.
He has specialized bones inside of his skin called osteoderms that help protect him.
And then, do we know Stevie's a boy or girl? We don't know.
We don't know quite yet. Stevie's still a little bit young for us to know his gender.
And what age is that typically we find that out?
Typically around 4 or 5 years, we can determine that pretty easily.
Okay. Well, looks like Stevie's ready to make some moves here, crawling around all over the place now. We're going to need to take a break. When we come back, we're going to have another friend with us. So don't go away, because you're going to see another one of our friends from the Oglebay Zoo along here with me and Joe Greathouse when we come back. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show.
Well, I was the oldest of 9 children, so as a result of that, I grew up fighting battles for my brothers and sisters, and we grew up in some pretty tough neighborhoods. I saw juveniles and women being mistreated, And I thought that it would be a wonderful thing to be able to fight for people that were less fortunate and that couldn't fight for themselves. The thing that I enjoy still is helping people and fighting fights that other people sometimes weren't able to fight themselves.
Bordas and Bordas, fighting for justice.
We're Panhandle Cleaning and Restoration, and we're gonna save you. We've got it down to a science, an absolute state of art. We do it all, restoration, cleaning, and reconstruction. When disaster strikes, just pick up the phone. We're Panhandle Cleaning and Restoration, and we're gonna save you.
Welcome back to the show. Thanks for being with us again this week. I have with me Joe Greathouse, the director of the zoo at Oglebay, also assistant professor of biology at West Liberty University, and he now has with him another one of his friends from the zoo, and that is Sweet Pea, the sloth. Here we go. Here's Sweet Pea, Joe.
So this is Sweet Pea. She's our Linnaeus two-toed sloth from Central and South America in the wild.
How old is Sweet Pea?
Sweet Pea's just over a year right now, so she's just getting the strength to where she can hang by herself for extended periods of time.
Now, is this another animal that people can interact with, or is that not appropriate?
It actually is. So a couple of years ago, we decided the interaction with the goats and the interaction with the lorikeets is so powerful. Why don't we give our guests the opportunity to interact with some of the animals the same way that we do, because it's such a rewarding experience for us. And we see that studies have shown if children interact with animals and develop a strong relationship with animals before 12 years old, they're much more likely to care about conservation and have a caring perspective in mind. So we started animal encounter programs, and the way we have that set up is guests can go in and work with our keepers and feed and train animals like the ring-tailed lemurs, the red pandas, the kangaroos, the meerkats, and even Sweet Pea. And what's wonderful about that is it's an experience that you're not going to find really anywhere else in the country. It's a really personalized experience where you spend about an hour with these animals and the keepers, and it's just an incredible experience.
Now, what do people need to do? They need to sign up if they want to do that, or how do you get involved in that?
They do. Typically, we take bookings through the zoo office, and then the phone number there is 304-243-4100. The guests will call and they'll schedule their animal encounter. And the benefit of the animal encounters is opposed to just the wonderful experience that you have. A portion of the proceeds from the encounters go to some of the conservation work that we do. Sweet Pea is actually part of the West Liberty program. So when our guests come and do an encounter with Sweet Pea, a portion of the proceeds that are generated go towards a student support fund at West Liberty University for incoming students in the zoo program.
We talked about that a little bit earlier in the show about the partnership with West Liberty, and you have a lot of employees there at the zoo, some full-time, some part-time, but there's a number of people there.
There are. When we're fully open and operational during the summer months, we can have upwards of 70 seasonal and full-time employees combined, but what's even better than that, our community support is wonderful. Everybody loves the zoo, so we have over 100 teen volunteers that come up, adult volunteers, and then now our students through the West Liberty program that come over and help support us.
Now, with the West Liberty program, I assume you don't have the type of staff that all these students can continue with the Oglebay Zoo once they get done with their studies. So they go out to the other zoos around the country and things of that nature?
Yeah, the goal is that they'll eventually be able to work in any facility that they would desire to in the future. And starting at Oglebay is an excellent stepping stone opportunity for these students because we teach them how to work with everything. Where if you were working at a big zoo to start out with, you may just work with the cats or may just work with the gorillas. So we give them a pretty generalized experience, and then it gives them the opportunity to step over to Columbus or step over to Nashville Zoo. We've had a lot of past keepers go down to Disney's Animal Kingdom because we were training students in a resort setting. Disney is a resort as well. So they learn not just how to take care of animals, but how to interact with guests and really create memories, because that's what we want to do at the zoo. We have a strong conservation and education mission, but in all reality, folks come to the zoo to have fun, and we want to create those wild memories for them.
So what other things can we expect to see maybe at the zoo this summer or maybe in the months or years to come?
So over this past year, what we've done is we've renovated the Discovery Lab region to where we have the new Ghost of the Bayou exhibit. We have our new ring-tailed lemur exhibit, an expanded cotton-top tamarin exhibit that Sweet Pea inhabits sometimes. We have a new white-naped crane exhibit down at our wetlands area. And what's really cool about that is this is an endangered species that we're participating in breeding programs with. And what impacts them in the wild is their primary breeding zone, or one of their primary breeding zones, is the demilitarized zone between North Korea and South Korea. So a very volatile place, very important species to conserve. Moving into the future, hopefully late this summer, we'll be opening a brand new nature play playground. So we'll be renovating the playground and giving opportunities for kids to connect with nature, with cool climbing structures that look like spider webs and vines, almost like an enlarged type of natural environment.
That'll be fun. We'll have a good time with that, I'm sure. Have to get the kids up there. So how old's Sweet Pea now?
Sweet Pea's just over a year old. So she's about half size.
She almost looks like she hangs on you like a baby would, or a toddler to some extent.
She does. She's incredibly strong, and eventually she'll hang fully upside down all of the time while she climbs. She typically will go down and sit just like a person whenever she wants to rest. When she starts to get tired, she'll give you a little like meh, meh. It tells you, just like you were mom, to go over and pick her up and bring her over to where you can take her to relax.
Okay if I pet her?
Oh, absolutely.
Soft, really soft. So she'll grow more from where she is right now.
Yeah, she's about half grown, so she's around 8.5 pounds. She'll get to around 15 pounds. Excellent climber, excellent swimmers. They don't move very well on the ground. So since they don't move on the ground very well, they climb to the bottom of the tree to use the bathroom only once per week.
Wow.
And what's really cool is they go to the bottom of the tree, they'll dig a little hole, they'd use the bathroom in that hole or defecate in that hole, cover it back up, and that'll eventually help grow new trees in the rainforest that they can utilize for food.
Interesting.
So they're excellent farmers.
Well, people will have to go to the zoo to see you and more of these animals and learn more about them. We don't want to give away all the secrets here today, but really cool to see them. Thanks for having Sweet Pea on the show. Thanks for having Stevie the alligator here with us today earlier, and we'll come check. I have to bring my kids up there to the zoo and check out some of these exhibits.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Appreciate it. Thanks for being here, Joe. We need to take a break. When we come back, I'll be talking a little bit of sports. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show.
Don't forget to do your homework.
All right, Mom. Trick or treat.
Here you go. Happy Halloween.
For your home, for your life, for more than 50 years, DeNoon Lumber.
We've obtained the record results in almost every field of law.
And other attorneys can't say we've had the largest verdict in this field. We can. We've done these things. We've tried these cases. We've gotten the big results. We've gotten the big verdicts. That sets us apart.
I think that says something to insurance companies. It says something to corporations that this is a firm to be reckoned with.
It's not the size of the verdict that's so important. It's the change that we hope to bring about.
Bordas and Bordas, fighting for justice.
Welcome back to the show. It's time to talk sports and start off with the Pittsburgh Pirates. What a strange start to the season for the Pirates. Of course, you're losing the series to the Red Sox, but sweeping the Cubs, the World Series defending champions. But the big news out of Pittsburgh, of course, is the 80-game suspension of center fielder Starling Marte for the use of performance-enhancing drugs, and something that we are seeing far too often in sports, particularly maybe baseball. And one of the things that maybe hasn't been as highly publicized about the suspension is that even once Starling Marte comes back, which will be sometime in late July, and is able to complete the season, if the Pirates are to make the playoffs, he is out again for the playoffs. The 80-game suspension always also carries with it an automatic suspension for the playoffs. So even if the Pirates are able to make the playoffs and Marte is back for the second half of the season, he will not be able to participate in the playoffs. So obviously a huge blow to the Pirates. They reshuffled the outfield in the offseason to put Marte in center field, moved McCutchen to right field, Polanco to left. Now looks like McCutchen back in center field for the time being, and have to maybe do it by committee for a little bit in left field, or excuse me, in right field while Marte is out. But we see this too often, and it's a shame to see, because you've got these phenomenal athletes, and then it makes you wonder how much of it is because they're doing things like this. Hopefully this was just a one-time instance, a mistake. Maybe someone gave him something to eat or to utilize that he didn't know was banned or didn't know what it was. But you got to be very careful if you're in professional or college sports these days to make sure you're not putting anything in your body that you don't know exactly what it is, because there can be serious consequences like this. Sticking with Pittsburgh sports, of course, a very sad time here also with the passing of longtime Steelers owner, chairman Dan Rooney. Mr. Rooney, one of the legends of the NFL. Of course, one of the things he's most famous for is the Rooney Rule, which requires the interviewing of an African-American coach when considering the hiring process. And of course, the Steelers with an African-American coach and Mike Tomlin, and who's been with the team for a number of years. And of course, Dan Rooney also a U.S. ambassador to Ireland in addition to his longtime service with the Steelers, and just a gentleman class act by all accounts and everything that he did. So lived a great life, a good life, and sad to see him go. Everybody that's a part of Steelers Nation will miss Mr. Rooney. May he rest in peace. Staying with professional sports, of course, the NBA and NHL playoffs are underway, and the NHL playoffs, the Penguins are off to a great start, and I like the Penguins to repeat. I think they have a real shot to do it. I like them to win the finals, win the Stanley Cup again this year. You don't see people repeat too often in the NHL. Of course, the Penguins did it back in the early 90s, but I think they can do it again. I'll take them in the NHL finals this year over the Anaheim Ducks in 7 games. So that's going to be my prediction. And then the NBA playoffs, I like the Golden State Warriors to come back and get it done this year. The tough loss to the Cavs last year after being up 3-1 in that series, letting the Cavs come back to win the NBA finals. I think it'll be Warriors-Cavs again, but I think this time the Warriors get it done in 6 games. WVU spring football is wrapped up, and of course, the Gold Blue spring game, everybody wanted to see the new quarterback, Will Grier, the transfer from Florida, and boy, did he look sharp. Quick release, accurate, good passer, and of course, some other changes with Jake Spavital calling the plays now as the offensive coordinator. Came back to Morgantown. Dana Holgerson has given up the play calling duties. It'll be interesting to see how that goes this year. I think it'll go really well. I like the idea of Jake Spavital calling the plays. They ran a ton of plays when he was at Cal last year. I think 118 plays in one game. It'll be up-tempo, fast-paced. I think it's going to be exciting to watch, and I think Will Grier will do a great job running that offense. So big things could be ahead for the Mountaineer football team this year, but a lot of starters to replace as well. That's all that we have time for this week. Thanks for joining me and Joe Greathouse and my animal friends. We'll see you again next week on The Jamie Bordas Show.